Right up there with the holiday season, back to school can be one of the most expensive times of the year. With the tough economy, however, the number one lesson this year might be budgeting. Here to discuss is Brian Betz, a debt counselor with Money Mentors, a not-for-profit credit counseling service. Welcome back to Alberta Prime Time, Brian.
Thank you, Shauna.
First off, just how expensive is this time of year for families? Do we have any idea what parents typically spend?
Well, and again, typical, what does that mean? But some latest industry statistics say that the average is about $500. $472, I think, was the actual number. And that really included things like clothing, shoes, school books, and also backpacks. So these are all typical expenditures that parents have during that time of the year. And the only other thing I'll throw into that is typically the older the child, the more money that you're going to spend. So, you know, if you've got ones that are in, elementary school, middle school, or whatever, they're going to be less than your high schoolers, which kind of, you can figure that out on your own, kind of makes sense, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I have two, and as they get older, it is more and more. And as you mentioned, about 500, that's times two. And there's always so much excitement over new school supplies and clothes, going the new route. How do you keep that spending reined in, though?
Well, and again, we're going to go back to the old scenario is do your budget. Number one, how much money do you have to allocate towards that? The other thing, though, I'd like to throw in that is to get your kids involved in this process. Financial literacy is a big thing, and people are always reluctant to challenge their kids or talk to their kids about money, and I think this is an ideal time. If you've got younger kids, then you just explain to them that, hey, the money doesn't come out of that thing in the wall, the ATM. We actually have to work, and this is how many hours I have to put in at work for this amount of money, which then goes to your school supplies. So to help them get a little bit of a perspective. With your older kids, another way to play that might be to say, okay, fine, here's X amount of dollars. And now if you want to spend some of your own money and add to that or whatever, but here, you decide what you want to spend it on. So they might say, okay, I only want a few things that are labels, or I'm going to go to more, hit the sales rack and do whatever. So I think that's part of it. You do your budget, you figure out what you can afford, and then involve your kids in the process.
And I think that really nails it with planning as well, doesn't it?
I think the thing that we would like to see ideally is that you start saving for next year right now. Put it in. Your annual expenses are really one of those misunderstood parts of everybody's budget. And I think that with annual vacations, Christmas, school supplies, those types of things, you want to put a certain amount of money away every year. And of course now, if you start saving, you would have that $500 per child or whatever for next year. And also when you are doing your budget, don't forget about school fees and school trips and all of those other things that do come up on a regular basis.
Yeah, bus passes too. Those can rack up.
Bus passes too, good point, yeah.
You have some tricks though as well for parents as they're getting ready for this, don't you?
I do. I don't know if I have any particular tricks. Again, it's all just about making the budget and involving your kids in the process.
What about using cash, Brian?
Well, cash, again, that's one of the, okay, let's call that the trick then, is that's one way to really keep things within your spending limits. And credit cards, you can be sucked into, oh, well, I can just spend a little bit more. And then, again, the thing we always see with people is that they typically put money on their card and they don't necessarily pay it off. So by using cash, it allows you to stay within your means. You give your cash to your older teens, and you say, oh, okay, here's the amount, this is it, rather than going out with your credit cards. So yeah, no, that's a very good tip. The other thing is, again, with not paying full price, there's always lots of sales. Keep your eye out for sales. If you get stuck at this time of the year buying things, then again, you're going to miss out on some sales. So if you can look during the year or earlier, at the end of school season, before we get into this pressure situation of having to have these supplies for the next week or so, the more that you can stretch those out and plan for it and look for bargains, the better off you're going to be.
And Brian, I want to touch on this too. You mentioned that it's so important to get your children involved from the get-go, but not only is that good for them to learn, but they're learning from you as a role model too, aren't they?
Absolutely. And so it's a difficult situation. You can't say one thing and then expect them to do something different. So you have a very, very valid point in terms of being that role model and living within your means. And with the financial literacy, and you're explaining to your kids when you go to the grocery store, for instance, all of these other opportunities, when you're buying clothing for yourself, you are role modeling for your kids, and that will translate. I had a colleague who was really good at this, and she would give money to her kids, and those kids would really stretch a dollar. They saw what she did over the course of the year, and then they would hit the sales racks, and they were really good with money. And that's what you're doing, is preparing these kids for adulthood. So walk the talk, and they'll pick it up.